grab your broadsword because we're falling headfirst in the world of knights, wizards, and dragons. No, it's not Golden Axe. It's Sonic and the Black Knight. How did this second storybook game come about? How does it compare to Secret Rings? Is it worth checking out? Find out on this episode of SEGA Talk. SEGA Bits presents SEGA Talk, a podcast talking all things SEGA with your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome to episode number 157 of SEGA Talk. I'm Barry. With me is George.
Or is that Sir Lancelot or something like that, right?
The knight to my round table. No, wait, that wouldn't make sense. Sir George.
Okay, I'll accept Sir George. I like that. It sounds mystical and honorable.
It does. It is. You are. Sir George, would you present to us the Patreon plug?
If you check us out on www.patreon.com/SegaBits, you could support this show for as little as $1 a month and up to, I don't know, infinity. Give us a gajillion dollars. But regardless, if you want to support this podcast, you can check us out on patreon.com/SegaBits. Thank you guys for your support. We love all of you.
You are the Guinevere's to our King Arthur's. I don't know. I actually don't know much about the story. I know more about the Sonic take than anything, but we'll get into that. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Sonic and the Black Knight. It is a platform game that released in 2009, developed by Sonic Team and published by Sega as part of the Sonic the Hedgehog series, or I should say Sonic the Hedgehog storybook series for the Wii. It serves as the second and final installment following Sonic and the Secret Rings from 2007. And before we get into all that, I have to share the memories of our Patreon picker because they're essentially our producers. They pick the games we talk about. If they don't have anything to pick, we pick it. But they've been picking for us pretty consistently here. And our picker this episode is Daniel Andres. So here's what he had to say. What? This game already? If I'm not mistaken, I think that I requested this episode. Man, how long has it been since this came out now? 15 or 16 years? Sonic and the Black Knight. Boy, where do I begin? Well, I for sure do remember the controversy surrounding this game when it first came out. At the time, at least half the internet hated Sonic having a sword. Now the game is looked at as a forgotten gem in the Sonic series, which I'll touch on more later. Oh, he's got a whole essay. Personally, I liked this game when it first came out. I can't remember how I obtained it, but I remember playing it in my bedroom in April of 2009 or 10. I don't even remember if I got this game during the initial release. Anyways, I didn't like how easy the gameplay was, and to this day I still don't. It's not the kind of game that's fun easy. It's just kind of piss poor easy. Ooh, he's swearing. But it does have its fair share of cool epic moments still. And the later bosses in the first halfway point of the game going forward are decently good, especially the last two. The last two final bosses are very epic, and I won't get into that. A big part of this game that I do love, however, which is what most people remember it for, is the character dialogue moments in that story. It's really well done, and for a bit over a decade, it was the last really good, well-written Sonic story we had on screen until the Sonic movie came out. Yeah, let that sink in. Thank Light Gaia that Ian Flynn is writing for modern Sonic games now. Shiro Nakawa's work won't be forgotten, though. Plus, it's so awesome that Crush 40 went all out with the music in this game. Little did I know that this was their swan song Sonic game. Who knows if they'll ever work for Sega ever again now with the current lawsuit. Yeah, that's a good point. This was the very first Wii game I ever played with actual Wiimote and nunchuck, where the controls didn't bother me. Before this game, I avoided motion controls like the plague. But shortly after I'd beaten this game, I got really into Skyward Sword and Mario Galaxy. And now Wii motion controls do not bother me at all. On a closing note, I just want to leave off that I really love Secret Rings and Black Knight stories. They're great and honestly deserve a second chance and a re-release of some kind in today's gaming world. Maybe we'll see it someday after the 06 remake happens. Who knows? And then you followed up going, oh yeah, I did request this episode. Thanks, George and Barry. So this is Daniel's comment even when he didn't think he picked the episode. Let that sink in. Yeah. But yeah, he touched on a lot of things that we will touch on. Now, longtime listeners to the show might be thinking, hey, did you guys cover Sonic and the Secret Rings? Because this is kind of like the second installment of the storybook series. And the answer is no. But for the sake of this episode, let's pretend that we did, so that when we do a future Secret Rings episode, people who listen to these episodes in chronological order, which is a playlist you can check out on YouTube. It's a pretty popular one for Sega Talk. I think people like jumping into the show and listening from the early days of the designs of the Sega logo all the way through. I think our most recent might be maybe the Sonic movie or one of the Yakuza games. But having said all that, I think we should just briefly talk about Secret Rings a little bit before we delve into Black Knight. So, George, can you remember the first time you heard about Sonic and the Secret Rings as well as Sonic and the Black Knight? And did you play those on release? Because I know these were coming out during the Sega Nerds years for you.
So I didn't review this game. I waited for it to go down because I wasn't all sold on... I wasn't a big fan of the Wii at the time. Like, I didn't think the controls were appropriate for every game. I feel like people were going kind of all out on like just waggle controls just to sell the gimmick because it was popular. And some games just didn't need it, so I didn't know if I was going to get this one. I was shocked that they did for the Secret of the Ring for the first installment. They did such a like an unknowing tale, like what is it, 1,000 Nights or whatever it's called. The tale is based on. And I thought it was one of the better looking Wii games at the time because there was a lot of bad looking games. I think these two games actually do look really good for Wii games. And I think that's probably the best thing about these games is the visuals. What about you?
Yeah. I was aware of these games. I was aware of the Wii, but I didn't really get a Wii until Sonic Colors came out. And that was 2009, right? I might be wrong. No.
I think it's in that era.
Sonic Colors released 2010. Yeah. And so 2010 was a big year for Sonic because that was Sonic 4, Episode 1. That was Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, Sonic Colors. And that's when Sega Bits started, which is, I think, nearing its 15th anniversary. Yeah, it's wild. So that I got into Sonic Colors, and then I went back and picked up these games. And I have both of them. I bought all the Wii Sonic games, but after playing Sonic Colors and just like popping these discs in and getting a sample of these, I was like, no, not my thing. And I just never returned to them. And I'm sure you kind of felt that same way. They, at the time, really compared visually, or at least gameplay wise, to like Endless Runners. Which had a negative stigma for some people. I, at the time, was running a mobile Sega portable handheld gaming blog. So I was writing about all those new App Store releases from Sega, and I don't think I ever covered Sonic Dash because that came out a bit later. But I remember at the time thinking, like, if they did an Endless Runner with Sonic, I'll check it out. But like... Yeah, it is kind of bottom of the barrel for me in terms of like mobile phone gaming. So when I saw these, I was like, no thanks. And then I think I made the mistake of popping in Secret Rings first, because Secret Rings, the control scheme is so bad. I don't like how you hold the controller like an NES controller, which I think is the most like basic, crappy way to play any Wii game. Because I'm like, seriously, I'm playing a 3D Sonic game with a D-pad and 2 buttons. And then when I learned it was completely motion controlled, and like it just turned me off. And then I don't know if you've played Secret Rings, but it's a really bad start to the game because the whole stage system are menus. So you pick a menu, and then the menu is like 15 locked pages or whatever. Yeah. And then each of those is a tutorial that lasts like a minute. You complete it, you go back to that and select the next one. And it keeps going. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I have to play the same stage 15 times to learn little tidbits of gameplay that you could have squeezed into one introductory stage. Yuck. You know, it's just so
bad design overall. You could tell that they were just stretched super thin during this era. There was just so many games. But I was going to say one thing about the Secret Rings. Do you remember the talk when the game was announced that all the fans were really excited because supposedly this was supposed to tell people where the ring came from and the whole of it?
That's a great point too, because I remember at the time we were like, oh, Sonic and the Secret of the Rings? Oh my gosh. Like, I know the Saturday morning cartoon like said they came from a lake or something. Right. Or in the movies now, they're like in a little bag and Sonic's like the leprechaun, like, where are me rings, you know? But yeah, this I was like, oh wow. And then when I learned it was just like, oh, it's like he wears it and it's not actually the ring from the Sonic games. That kind of let me down. Now, having said all that, now that we are going into the Black Knight with this discussion, I will say from the onset that, you know, this episode gave me a reason to pop this game in. And I'm going to say from the get-go, I absolutely love this game. What? I love it.
No, I got to podcast is over. No, I'm joking. It's
yeah. And look, I can smile and show off my new tooth. Look at that.
Oh, nice. It looks good.
Yeah, eagle-eyed Sega Talk fans might remember for like over a year I had a little chip on the corner of that tooth.
I have one.
I got it bit.
Yeah. I need to get that picture. Hey,
anyway, yeah.
I will say about Black Knight though that like I could see why a lot of people like it, but I'm surprised that you say love it. What do you love about it?
I think that's what this episode will cover. Aha. So before we get into the gameplay and things like that, let's talk about the story. So the story of Sonic and the Black Knight begins in the world of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, where Merlina, Merlin's granddaughter, is fleeing from dark knights. With no escape, she summons a hero, Sonic the Hedgehog, who quickly takes down the attackers. However, before he can finish the fight, Merlina warps him away, revealing that King Arthur has been corrupted by the scabbard of Excalibur, becoming the tyrannical Black Knight. To defeat him, Sonic must wield Caliburn, a talking sword, and prove himself as a knight. Sonic challenges King Arthur but fails, forcing him to train under the blacksmith, who is Tails, complete trials with Nimue, the Lady of the Lake, I just call her Amy, and defeat Arthur's knights, who are Sir Lancelot, played by Shadow, Sir Gawain, Gawain, played by Knuckles, and Percival, played by Blaze. After claiming their sacred swords, Sonic faces King Arthur in Avalon. He uses their power to overcome him, and I'll give it away. Arthur vanishes, leaving only his scabbard. The end credits roll, and that's the end of the game until a little message appears saying there's a new mission. And as it turns out, the game's not over. There's a twist. Should I spoil the twist?
Go for it. I guess you could.
All right.
The game's 16 years old. Come on.
Yeah, I'll spoil the twist. So the twist is that Merlina created Arthur as an illusion, and she seizes the scabbard to make the kingdom. Or I'm sorry, Merlin created Arthur as an illusion to protect the scabbard, which Sonic defeated the illusion made by her grandfather, and in turn now she has the scabbard. And Sonic and the knights attempt to stop her with a barrier, but she proves too powerful. Caliburn gets broken. Sonic gets nearly killed. However, The sacred swords revive Caliborn as Excalibur. Sonic transforms into the equivalent of Supersonic, a golden knight. And in the climactic battle, Excalibur Sonic defeats the Dark Queen. And then after Sonic, he's like, yeah, it's okay, Merlina, and he gives her some life lessons. The knights are about to disband, but Caliburn declares Sonic the true King Arthur. And then in the epilogue, Sonic tells the story to Amy as an excuse to ditch her, but she doesn't believe him. She chases him with her hammer. And meanwhile, the book King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table transforms into Sonic and the Black Knight. So are you at all aware of the King Arthur story? I feel like you are.
A little bit. I mean, when you're a kid, you hear here and there about it, the Round Knight, the Kingdom of Camelot and all that little things. I wasn't like Anne or anything and like collected posters of the Round Table Knights or anything, but I do know a little bit of it, yeah. How about yourself?
All right. Well, then there you go. I saw the movie, is it Camelot?
Is that
not the comedy thing?
The 2002 or something?
No. 1967.
Okay.
Camelot. It's a musical fantasy drama film. And who stars in it? Oh, Richard Harris, who went on to play Dumbledore.
Right. No, I haven't seen that one actually, but yeah, I mean it's a famous story, but like I don't know, like would you ever thought this story was going to be adapted into a Sonic game?
Never, ever. But as the storybook series, like it makes sense. Like you did Arabian Nights with the genie, and now you're doing Sonic and the Black Knight with King Arthur. I don't know what they would have done next. Maybe at the end of this episode, we can like speculate if they did a third one. But something I think is kind of interesting here is Eggman is nowhere to be seen in this game. It's one of the few Sonic games where he does not appear at all. But what's interesting is that with Merlin and Merlina, you have a very Sonic Adventure 2, like Gerald Robotnik and the grandson, situation there. And the fact that Arthur is like a creation of Merlin and then Merlina takes it over, which is very like Sonic Adventure 2 again. You know what I mean? So I thought that was interesting, where she's basically the Eggman of the game, but she looks nothing like him. As far as adapting the story, I think we're both like not too well versed in it to say for sure, but I think the characters here slot in much better. I really love the fact that Blaze, Knuckles, and Shadow, who all are initially rivals to Sonic, remain like enemies and rivals throughout the game. It's the only game where they're not who they are, but the fact that they're playing these like enemy rival roles is really cool. And it kind of tracks with that Gerald Robotnik, Merlin, Merlina kind of thing, where they initially are like tricked and are serving Arthur, who is an illusion created by Merlin, aka like Gerald Robotnik. You know what I mean? So like Shadow has a very similar connection there, and Blaze and Knuckles, I guess. I don't think Blaze was ever like tricked, maybe, but I don't think she was like besties with Sonic from the onset.
No.
What do you think about that twist? It's the only time a Sonic game has done a false ending.
Yeah, it has been. I thought the ending was good. Obviously, I don't remember if I don't remember if I looked at my review before this, if I talked about the ending, but I thought the story was just all right. One thing I think miss about this era was that there's a lot more with Sonic's friends, and I think this game does Sonic's friends a lot better than most modern games do. Like Sonic Forces, I feel like the friends weren't really represented in a good light or written well. And this one somehow does it better. I don't know how, but that's something I noticed about this game compared to the newer ones. Besides that, the twist, I like it. I think you had to do something to shake it up, or it would have been even more forgettable as a game. I still think the storybook games are forgotten, but because there are just so many Sonic games coming out in this era that some of them are going to be forgotten. But yeah, I think it's pretty. It had to have something. But yeah.
I love the twist. I like the idea of like when we were playing Sonic Adventure, I think the supersonic thing was a surprise, but you kind of knew that it was going to happen. It wasn't as though the game ended and then there was twist, because we're like, well, where's that chaos? Like, we saw him in the opening titles. He hasn't appeared yet. But here, like, they very clearly, like, he kills King Arthur and then it's over. And you're like, oh, okay, that was kind of a letdown. And then it ends up having like a really cool ending, and it almost kind of does something similar to, again, Sonic Adventure 2, where all the characters come together and you get to play as all of them to like progress Sonic through to the ending. And it makes sense because the writer for this, and we'll talk about him in a little bit, wrote Sonic Adventure 2. And so it's really interesting that this game actually has a lot of Sonic Adventure 2 plot, like, diluted into it. Like, it plays out a little differently, but on the surface, like, a grandfather creates something and tricks Shadow into helping him, and then it turns out that the grandchild is the one that takes it over, and you're like, okay, that's Sonic Adventure 2. But let's talk about the gameplay, which very much is not Sonic Adventure 2. So Sonic and the Black Knight, it introduces sword play alongside traditional Sonic platforming and speed. Players wield the sword using the Wii remote, seamlessly cutting through enemies. Tougher foes require advanced techniques like thrusting, parrying, and other maneuvers beyond combat. The sword can be used for traversal, such as slowing Sonic's descent by thrusting it into walls, which I think is so silly. The gameplay is more akin to Sonic Unleashed than Sonic and the Secret Rings, with Sonic's movement controlled via the analog stick. The game is primarily 3D, though certain sections shift to a 2D perspective. And George, I don't know, have you ever played the Wii or PS2 version of Unleashed?
Yeah, I actually have. I reviewed Unleashed on the PS2, and yeah, I have. It's interesting looking back at the reason that we had all these games was because they had to make brand new versions of games on these consoles. So yeah, I remember playing it. They're like totally different games in the PS3 and 360 version.
Yeah, it is interesting because, I mean, you could argue that Secret Rings is almost like the 06 equivalent for the Wii, and that Black Knight is the, I guess, Unleashed equivalent, but they did make an Unleashed version for it. But yeah, I think that's why the gameplay kind of felt so recognizable to me, because I played the PS2 version of Unleashed and later picked up the Wii version and tried that. And like, as much as I like the HD version on the Xbox 360, I think it's really interesting and kind of fun how they downgraded it to almost feeling like it's kind of weird because like we're playing Sonic Unleashed ported, like a version made for the Wii, but it plays almost like a game that feels like older than Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. You know what I mean? Like it feels
restrictive and small, but looking back now, that's almost kind of like fun. You know, you're like, you're so used to Sonic Frontiers and all these big games. And then you go back and you're like, oh, wow, there's no overworlds. It's just like dialogue and cutscenes and maps. Levels. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I really liked, where it felt like a very condensed, smaller version of Sonic Unleashed. And control wise, it feels a little more open. I talked about Secret Rings at the beginning, and like to move backwards in Secret Rings, you do this with the Wiimote, but you have to do it like correctly. Otherwise, Sonic gets a little weird. And it's just so bizarre to have him walking backwards. And here in Black Knight, you just jump backwards. And it's
it's not a game where you want to be going backwards constantly. What's a game that does that? Can Streets of Rage do that? Can you go back?
Streets.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, no. Yeah, I think once you
No.
where the screen clears the back.
The screen stops you. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like either a 2D or 3D game where you can go back, but it doesn't really help you. I guess like racing games, like Daytona, you can go backwards, but you don't really want to.
Like
That's where this game.
Novi games, can you go back? I think you can, but it's like
I think you can, yeah. And so it's like it's a game though where backtracking's available, but it's not really optimal because the camera's fixed. So, and I think Unleashed does that too. But in any case, as far as the sword play, how did you feel about bringing swords into Sonic gameplay? Because I have my opinions on that.
I thought it was weird when it first got announced, but to be honest with you, I remember the feedback from fans, and it was like obviously like, oh, swords are so dumb, but everyone was like hyped because they're like, finally Sonic has a sword. You know, some of the fan bases, Shadow Boys, and so like it did make sense though if you think about it, because you have to have something to represent the Wiimote that you're swinging around. And a sword is sick, so it makes sense that they use a sword. I'm just shocked that he did it because I thought they might have said, oh, Sonic with a sword, that's too mature. So I'm happy. I mean, I think they pulled it off fine. No one complained. Obviously, no blood. It's very cartoony. So, I actually
100%.
It's fine. But what about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Whenever these spin-off games, and these are spin-offs, it's like a side series. I always give them a lot more leniency because I'm like, okay, I think this is where Sonic Team should be experimenting and exploring and trying new things, not the main series. Like, don't, like throw us through a loop every game being like, oh, Werehog. Oh, I don't know what other weird things they did to us over the years. But in this case, like, Sword's weird, but it's a spin-off game and it is a storybook game. And if you're doing a King Arthur story and Sonic doesn't have a sword, what are you doing? And I honestly think visually it looks so cool to have him running and the sword's too long for him. So he lets it like hang behind him. And it reminds me of Gungrave, I think. Is that the game I'm thinking of?
The PS2 game with
where you have a really big sword, right?
Oh no, you're thinking about Berserk, the Guts Rage. For Dreamcast.
Maybe I am. Yeah. Gungrave, you carried a coffin.
Carried a coffin.
Yeah, but like I guess that kind of is similar, where it's like characters carrying ridiculously big things, but it looks cool the way they carry them. And I don't know, maybe I'm coming off of Phantasy Star Online, like 10 years after that, this game comes out, and it's like, it's kind of cool. Like I like the melee weapons in those games. And so I think it's cool to like give Sonic a weapon. I think if you're going to give him one, give him a sword. I don't like the idea of Sonic using a gun. But I like the sword, and I like the sword talking. I think that's kind of funny. I mean, this is a weird reference, but like HR Puffin stuff has a talking flute. And I think it's just really funny that Sonic has his own like Freddy the Golden Flute, who's like talking to him throughout the game. I kind of wish Caliburn had a high pitched voice, so he was like, "Hey Sonic, what are you doing?" But
Talking Swords is cool. There's a new fantasy series, the Stormlight Archives. One of the characters has a talking sword that always wants to kill everyone and eat pancakes. That's his like gimmick. I don't
remember
to do that though.
Remember the talking sword in the singing sword in Roger Rabbit?
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah, wicked witchcraft. Yeah, I don't know.
I forgot to say in the beginning, but like this whole storybook thing kind of reminds me of like Mickey Mouse movies from back in the day, or the TV shows where he would go on, like folk tales. That's what it reminded me of.
In the Brave Little Tailor, that was like a double length short for Mickey Mouse, and I think that's one of his coolest looks because he's a tailor, but they give him almost like this knight look, and then he carries around a giant sewing needle, but it's so big it looks like a sword. And I think that kind of like this cartoonish little animal character carrying a sword looks cool. It just looks cool. So I'm all for it. I like it.
And it also kind of like separates this game from the other Sonic games, which there was a lot of at the time, by visually representing Sonic with a sword. It's just obviously that game.
For sure. And now on the flip side, you're using the Wiimote for it. But unlike a lot of the tech demos they were doing at the time, where if you remember the ones, they'd be on stage showing like, oh, we turn our hand just a little bit and on screen the sword moves. In this game, it's very much like waggle and it does an action. There's no real sword play involved, which I think is a good thing, because I think if Sonic Team went all out and were trying to actually replicate one-to-one sword fighting, it might have ruined the game.
Because they would have to show it off. They'd be like, you have to swing this exact way to hit this enemy.
Right.
And it won't.
Right. And so I found that just being able to swing it at the right moments, no matter what way you move, it's satisfying enough. Now, I do feel people's frustrations saying that there should be like a controller version. And it's a shame that they didn't do that. I think nowadays, for accessibility purposes, they would have to, because there's people, like in a wheelchair who'd probably want to play this game and they can't move their arms around. They can maybe move their fingers. They have a special rig.
I'm surprised.
But yeah, that's
didn't talk about that when the Wii was popular, that like a big section of gamers can't play some of these games because of the waggle.
And meanwhile, Xbox for years have been like making adaptable controllers. I think they have a consumer version where it's every button and you can configure it with their team, so that if you're, like you have limited motion, you have one hand, you have a few fingers, like they make it work as best they can. So yeah, I think that's a downgrade here, just like with Secret Rings, where it's like, I don't want to do this. Can I just use the controller to move Sonic? And what's a game they actually like? Sonic Free Riders, people give that game a lot of grief, but it does have a controller option, which is really nice. They don't force it on you. So if you are a Sonic Riders fan, you can play the game with a controller. So I think that's the downside here, is that it's a late era Wii game. To my knowledge, it is. When did the Wii come out?
2006, so maybe like mid.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like 3 years in. But yeah, like it's kind of an era where people just started making controller games, and I'm surprised they didn't here. But other gameplay elements included, and I thought this was really funny. The stages include civilians that you can actually help or harm, which affects your night ranking at the end of each stage. Thankfully, it's not like Shadow the Hedgehog, where it really like screws you over if you like hurt one of them. It's just kind of like a fun little side sort of mission. The ranking grants you different titles, which serve as invisible score multipliers. Assisting citizens also allows players to purchase items such as gauntlets, magical tomes, and swords. The game features around 200 collectible items, some found in treasure chests, and there was an online mode which enabled treasure trading. This gameplay element would sometimes bring gameplay to a halt, though. I don't know if you've stopped and traded with people. It's kind of funny, though.
I mean, you can't.
But it wasn't.
Say, I wish they would have brought the little trading and like villagers into the last game, the Frontiers game. That would have been sick. But like, that's what I was noticing, that like you have more to do in these little concise levels, like giving things to like these, than they did in the whole open world almost, I feel like. I mean, interacting with civilians, I meant.
Right, yeah. And this element is very much in line with what SEGA was doing at the time. I don't know if you remember Knight's Journey into Dreams, the sequel, but they had a whole like additional thing going on that was kind of Chow Garden-y, but not. But yeah, it's been a long-standing tradition of Sonic Team games, at least up to this point in 2010, 2009, to have like weird little side NPCs that you can either collect or put in a garden or trade things with. So I really actually kind of like this element. It reminded me of Burning Rangers, where you could get like messages. It reminded me of the Nightopians, where you could like kind of raise them within the stage, but it didn't really affect you too much. And I like that. And I think that's a kind of a trend as you go through the Black Knight. There's a lot of fun little things that don't necessarily affect the big picture, but that's a good thing, because you don't want to be like, oh, I can't complete the game because I hurt a villager, or I'm constantly stopping and trading items because I can't progress because of that. Like, it's just silly optional stuff. And the whole like 200 collectible items thing, it kind of reminded me of Power Stone too, a little bit, where that game too, it wasn't necessary, but it was just kind of fun to like find random weird items and then see what they do. And another great thing too is that there's a lot of like additional what would you call them? Almost like actions or whatever that you can earn, but they just automatically happen. It's actually a lot easier than, say, like Sonic Generations, where you actually have to go into that menu and like add and remove things. Like in this case, a lot of the stuff just automatically happened to you. And if you want to go into a menu and look them up, you can. Otherwise, you can play the game and just be like, I'm oddly doing a little bit better. And then you're like, oh, it's because I unlocked something that gives me like score multipliers. But then there's 2 slots where you can put items, and they just kind of do very simple things. It's almost like Sonic Dash, where you can equip like a Chow or a Wisp, and it just like makes you do something a little bit better. But it's not like game breaking, and it's not necessary. So I really like that element. Traditional level items like springs and speed pads are replaced with elements. So yellow fairies provide 10 rings, blue fairies act as springs and speed boosts, red fairies fill the soul gauge, and this gauge is replenished by defeating enemies or collecting red fairies triggers a high-speed soul surge attack. So that's basically like the boost equivalent in this game, which allows you to lock on the enemies and rush at them very quickly and just like hit the crap out of them. And it's actually my favorite element. I don't really play that many like action sword fighting games, but can you think of any games where there's like a special superpowered sword move where it automatically locks on and lets you do something cool?
I'm trying to think. Devil May Cry, right? It has a lock on button, and you could do some interesting stuff.
Switched.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's all I could do. But about as the elements, obviously, if they just like kept everything Sonic themed, I would have been disappointed if they don't do obviously fairies and all this other themed storybook stuff. I mean, it comes with the territory, so yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that kind of stuff. I hope they do that in more games if they ever do themed games in the future, which I don't think they will, but you never know. Maybe DLC, they'll do a Knights DLC to do a callback on this for a future game.
Possible, yeah. Another thing I liked was replacing rails with I think it's called a ballista that you fire, like using a ground thing, and then you grind along the rope. I thought that was cool. And personally, I like this element to the game where a lot of like the common tropes of springs and dash pads and spikes really feel like they're a part of the stage rather than just like appearing as though they popped out of Sonic 2. Other games that do this include Sonic Frontiers, and dare I say, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. What's your opinion on them, like seamlessly adding level gimmicks to the stage so that they feel more a part of the environment?
I mean, yeah, they had like crystals. I'm trying to think of other things they had. Like you said, the ballistas that you could grind on. I think it's good because obviously when you go to Sonic's world, it's really like different in like the way that like Chemical Plant Zone, Green Hill Zone, and all these are very like arts. You know, you go to casino, like, what is it called, the casino zone, and casino night zone, and they're obviously all different, and it's on purpose, obviously. But this one has more of a obviously storybook Knights feel to it, which it's good. I like it. But sometimes, I mean, and they did a good job, I would say, in this game to do different things where, like, there's like a cave, there's an open field, there's this, like, bloomy looking level. So it's not always the same, because sometimes they could be kind of samey, which Frontiers kind of got a lot of crap for online for. People saying some of the levels were too alike. I think this one does enough to sticking to what the art style is supposed to be, but also have a lot of different types of looks in that world. Does it make sense?
And yeah, definitely. And it also is worth noting that a lot of those things like springs, dash pads, spikes, in game, those are supposed to be there from Eggman. Like, he put them there to like both help and hinder Sonic. I don't know why he helps him, but he puts them there. Someone does. And so the fact that Eggman's not in this game, it makes sense that you would do away with those things. Otherwise, it would be like, why are there spikes that very clearly were put there by Eggman, but it's like a storybook. So yeah, I thought it was a cool element to the game. The game also has a mission-based system, which is carried over from Sonic and the Secret Rings, but this time the objectives are a lot simpler. And I mentioned earlier that, you know, Secret Rings, it's basically all menu-based, whereas here it's map-based, which I really like. And again, to make a connection to Sonic Adventure 2, that's a game that used an overworld map as well, which I think at the time was the first Sonic game to use overworld map that you could interact with. I know the Game Gear and Master System games showed your progress through the island through, you know, like a little dot, but it wasn't super specific. Like it just kind of showed you progressing. And here it's non-linear, so like certain stages unlock. I'm trying to think of other Sonic games that used a map. Sonic Forces. What else? Sonic Colors used a planetary map, which I thought was cool. So here I think it's a lot more engaging and world building to use a map as opposed to a series of menus.
Of course.
And then on that, what's that?
I mean, it even makes sense in lore if you think about it. I mean, you're literally opening up a scroll that looks like a map, like an old school map, and you pick your level.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And so you have all these places, and we're not going to go through each stage, but like there's ones like the first one I think is Misty Lake, and then there's Camelot Castle. I'll read them. There's only like 10 of them. Deep Woods, which reminds me of the bug spray Deep Woods off. Titanic Plain, Crystal Cave, Molten Mine, Faraway Avalon, Knight's Passage, Shrouded Forest, Great Megalith. Oh, I lied. There's more. The Cauldron, Dragon Slayer, which is funny because that's like an arcade game. And then finally, Dark Hollow. And I really like that they're all like littered all over the map. You're not exactly sure what order they go in, but the map's availability kind of reveals that. So it's linear, but feels non-linear. And it wasn't until Titanic Plain, and I don't know if you've played that one or seen that one, but it looks like Planet Wisp or Sonic Frontiers. It's a huge open field. That was really cool. And I thought Sonic with like the Sega blue skies and the green grass running through, even though your like level is technically only like in-game 10 feet on either side of you. Like it's a very narrow path, but it feels much bigger. I thought that was amazing. I thought that was really cool. And I actually accidentally replayed that stage and I was like, oh, this is fun. And so I replayed it a second time. And that's very rare for me for games like this where I'm like, oh, I want to revisit that and go back to it. But going back to the notes here, I got myself a little derailed. Oh, yes. So some other elements to the game include a battle mode, an online ranking mode, and the treasury. And we're not going to talk too much about the battle mode, but did you ever try that?
I tried it like a couple, like maybe a couple of matches, like forever ago with just for the review, and I remember being like, I'm pretty sure this is not the selling point, so I'm just going to go with the review.
Right.
I can't even remember what it was. I just remember I was just like, oh, okay, it's cool. And then I moved on. So I just don't remember what it was. I don't think I was impressed by it. I do like the player things in Sonic games, and I wish it's something they brought back. I just hope that when they do it, they do it right. But what was your opinion on the battle mode?
It was fine. I mean, you kind of experience it in the game itself, and so you think, oh, it's just me and another player basically doing this, like hacking and slashing at each other. It's all local, though. I think it's up to 4 players, and it's actually a sizable cast, but what they kind of do is give you the characters in armor, and then as their like game selves, so it's kind of cheating, basically. I'd rather have it than not have it. And I'm glad that it's not online focused, because that would be dead now. You couldn't play it anymore. However, of course, online ranking doesn't work anymore, and you can't trade items. But again, like, who's going to do that? The treasury is actually very beefy. There's a lot of things to unlock, videos, photos. In fact, there's a whole fan art section that I didn't even really get into in the notes, but there was like a big fan art contest, and there's like, I don't know how many people, dozens, hundreds of pieces of fan art that are video-based. It scrolls up or down and shows their names, and it's funny, the UK one, I think just because his name starts with A, is Adam Tuff, who I think founded Sonic Stadium. So he's on there.
You do.
I thought that was cool. Just piece of fan art, drew Sonic,
Oh, Sonic, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was Shadow or not.
Oh. Well, that's what's interesting. This game is kind of like a time capsule, because I was watching them and I was expecting to see certain games and characters, and then I had to remind myself, oh, it's 2009. And these characters were probably drawn in 2008, 2007. So, like Silver was new.
Oh, yeah.
And that was about it. It's like up to Silver.
I feel from that era, he's the only character that actually survived. Well, maybe not even survived, because we haven't seen him in a while, but Chip didn't come back. The ghost, the haunted ghost in Unleashed. The Beast obviously isn't going to come back. Is there like anything of this era that you actually do want to see come back?
Well, the Ghosts got a new short, I think.
Oh, they did? Okay, so they did come back.
Yeah, but not in game. They were in, I think, a mission in Sonic Unleashed. But yeah, I think this game's interesting because you mentioned them. I'd love to see Blaze come back. I know on the SEGA Bits Discord, Aki, one of our writers, he loves Blaze. He's like, I don't remember what his accent sounds like, but he's like, I can't believe that they're sitting on Blaze. What a shame, no Blaze.
And it's funny because they need more female representation. It's something that I actually noticed now, when I went to watch the movie. Lots girls.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. The movie 3. There was a lot of girls that were watching the movie and were really into the whole, like, a Shadow's so cool. I mean, every kid thought he was awesome, obviously, but so it was pretty cool to see everyone get excited in the theater for Amy. And Blaze not. But
well, here I'll play the audio from this. It's my 3-year-old watching the end of the movie for the first time and reacting to seeing Amy on screen. Tell me if you can hear it.
Yeah. I can't hear it, though. I can't hear it.
She'll start talking.
I didn't get to watch the whole one.
She was complaining.
I didn't get to watch too much. Amy!
She was like... Amy. And so like little girls, they want females in these movies. And it's wild that it's taken 4 to get
Movies.
Amy Rose, who technically is like the second or maybe even the first friend of Sonic's, right?
Not Tails.
Like
Does Tails count?
Well, just you forgot what the release order is. I guess she's the second. Yeah.
Well, it's close.
But the fact that
Debatable.
Amy is older than Knuckles and Shadow by far, you know.
Right.
But she doesn't show up until, you know, but like little girls are going, Amy. But in any case, but this game though, it's notable for having full stages where you play as Knuckles, Blaze, and Shadow, which is wild. Like 3D Blaze stages. When did that last I don't think it's ever happened since or before. I think this is the only game where Blaze is playable in 3D. I think. Sonic Rivals?
No.
Was she in 06? No.
She was like a background character with the Shadow story, I think.
Was she playable? Maybe she was. Maybe I'm wrong. But any case, I thought it was really cool that they were playable here. Battle mode also features all the knights, as I mentioned, as well as Tails, Arthur, Silver, Jet, Shadow, Knuckles, Blaze, Amy. So, you know, it's not like the whole cast, but it's still something. Let's talk about the development. So after developing Sonic and the Secret Rings in 2007, Sonic Team immediately began work on its Wii sequel, led by Tetsu Katano, who had previously worked on Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes. Since the series' primary audience was children, the team decided to focus on that demographic to boost sales. The story was based on Knights of the Round Table to attract new players to both the Sonic series and the Arthurian legend, which I think is such a goofy like way that, you know, I transcribed some of this from like Sonic Retro and other writers, but they all are like, SEGA wanted to draw kids to the King Arthur legend. I'm like, why? Like, you don't have to do that.
No.
You know, like it's not up to you. Like, let teachers do that, you know?
Yeah. I don't get it, but all right.
But whatever. But they did mention that it influenced franchises like Star Wars, which is kind of interesting because Sonic borrowed from Star Wars, starting with Sonic 2 with the Death Egg, you know, and the Eclipse cannon and all that. So I guess it makes sense that Sonic would ape Star Wars and then he would ape what Star Wars aped. Unlike Sonic Unleashed, which emphasized level design, Sonic and the Black Knight focused more on combat and cinematic presentation. And I'd also say Black Knight focused on flow. I think it's one of those games where if you get the right flow going, you can really stylishly move through the stage and it becomes very pleasing. In that one stage I was talking about that I really like, Titanic Plane, there was this gimmick that I've never seen Sonic use since where there's these poles sticking out of the ground and you jump at them and Sonic kind of grinds on them as they fall to the ground. And it's just like little bits of grinding, but it's kind of a fun way to move through the stage. Shiro I'm going to butcher his name, Shiro Maekawa, who was the writer for Sonic Adventure 2, Heroes 06, and The Black Knight, was quoted as saying, "When I was put in charge of writing, I decided I'm going to make a Sonic that I like." And that's credit to the YouTube channel, The Geek Critique, for pulling that quote. I watched, I think his name is Josh. He does these great like retro game videos, and he did an hour-long kind of review run through of Black Knight. And I really liked it because he writes it as he's experiencing it. And his experiences were very similar to mine in that he's like, this game's kind of weird. It feels limiting. It feels small. It's not very fun. And then he was like, when he got to the same stage that I got, it was, oh, this is really cool. And then he's like, oh, it's unlocking things that actually make it a lot more playable. Why wasn't it like this from the get-go? Which you could say for a lot of Sonic games, like Frontiers, Sonic starts slow and you're like, come on, Sonic, you're 30 years old. You've been doing this for years. Why are abilities again? Like, come on.
I agree, and it was one of the things we talked about in the Frontiers episode, which we don't need Sonic to level up in games. We don't need them to get more powerful. I feel like Sonic is one of those characters that should be full force from the first level to the last level.
And that's how the Genesis games were. Like Sonic in Green Hill Zone and Sonic and Scrap Brain is the exact same character in terms of gameplay ability. But in games like, I guess, every Sonic 3D game since Sonic Adventure, at the very beginning, he's a different character to play as he is by the middle and end. And the question is, like, where does he max out? And I think the best games are the ones where he maxes out at like the 25% point through the story, because you don't want cool abilities become unlocked at the very last stage. And then you're like, why couldn't I do this from the get-go? This is fun now. Sonic Frontiers kind of did that. I think halfway through, I maxed out everything. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I had fun for the rest of the game. But yeah, so what's your sense of the team's previous projects leading up to the Black Knight, and what maybe strengths or weaknesses could you see being carried over from titles like Sonic Heroes and Sonic Adventure 2?
Well, like you said, the storyline and the points in the storyline, like the moments, have been repurposed for this game. And I think did it correctly, because I feel like Sonic Adventure 2 has some of the best moments and like story progression in probably any Sonic game if you want a more serious toned story. And I think it worked for even Sonic the Movie 3's strength to adapt it. So I think that was a smart thing. As for Heroes, I think this one kind of did the whole Heroes. I like playing as the heroes separately compared to like Heroes is where they were all like teamed up together, in my opinion. And I thought that the writing here wasn't as annoying as Heroes. Something about Heroes, they went all in on like it being a kid game. Like, so it's like this weird like give and take with Sonic Team, where they want to go dark in one game and then they have to pull it back. And all of a sudden they're kid game again, and then they have to like go back again to being a little dark. So I think Frontiers kind of hit it in the middle. It's not too dark, it's not too kiddie. But yeah, I think this game did better than Sonic Heroes on the kiddie scale, I guess.
For sure. And you know, the writer of this game, he said, I'm going to Sonic that I like. And it makes me wonder how much control he had in games like Heroes and 06, because to be quite honest, Sonic didn't really have. I guess he just like spewed catchphrases in those games, didn't he? Especially Heroes. He was just like, well, whatever, let's go, blah blah blah. You know, like it.
Right.
You don't feel like you could have a conversation with him in Sonic Heroes. If you met him, you're like,
no.
Oh my gosh, Sonic, it's so nice to meet you. Oh wow, let's go over there. And you're like, okay, cool. In 06, I don't really remember too much of the writing for him. But I definitely remember him in like Sonic Adventure 2 and here in the Black Knight. I feel like it's much more that sort of consistency where he feels a little more, I want to say like westernized, like the writing feels less like stilted and like they clearly translated from Japanese to English. Like in Sonic Adventure 2, it still felt a little weird, but I think in this game, just the writing felt more correct to the region it was written for. Like you'd see Sonic having conversations with Merlina or with the sword, and he was still funny and quippy, but they would actually have like a conversation. He wasn't just like, whoa, what's going on? This is wacky. You know, you'd be like, oh my gosh, Sonic, calm down.
It's crazy that there's people out there that miss that Sonic writing. I absolutely hated it. I mean, some of the games were great, but I was like, oh, Sonic's going to come and say his like one line, and then the next level is going to happen.
Right. Whereas I think in this game, the reason why the people like how Sonic's written so much is that he's a little more grounded. He's not grounded like Sonic Frontiers, where he's just like almost feels like I don't want to say flesh and blood. I'm not trying to get all like crazy here, but like you feel like he's a fully fleshed out character who can actually carry on a conversation, not like a catchphrase machine like he is in Heroes. So, it's kind of endearing to have him say heroic things and like jump into battle without being like scared or like confused. I guess that's why, I'm not a big Sonic characterization like expert. I actually don't think about it that much. Same thing with like renders. I don't think about renders that much. I don't think about characterization that much. Like if it clicks with me, then I like it. And if it seems weird, then I'm going to just say that game Sonic was kind of weird. And in this game, I think he's good. I like it. During early development, SEGA conducted focus testing in the US to determine which Arthurian characters should be included, with artists incorporating knightly elements into their designs. This led to Blaze the Cat being chosen as Percival, despite that character traditionally being male. And by traditionally, I mean it's a male character.
Right.
And this is why she's never called Sir Percival. The game retained the PhysX physics engine from Secret Rings. Well, art director Yoshitaka Miura styled it after Sonic Unleashed rather than opting for a more realistic look. And by that, I mean the one and done wacky Sonic look we had in 06. And thank God they didn't go with that. Cutscenes were handled by Yuji Yukawa, maintaining the previous game's artistic direction. I should note, though, that if you played Secret Rings and then you played this game, the cutscenes are much better. Mm-hmm. They're a lot more dynamic. It's easier to see things. Like the Secret Rings cutscenes look like all the parchment was burnt and you can hardly see the characters. Whereas here, it's actually a lot more like Valkyria Chronicles. And to be quite honest, I think this whole game, if it was on the Canvas engine, it would have been like beautiful. You know what I mean? Like that would have been amazing if this whole game looked like it was like a watercolor on scrolls or something like that. But at the very least, the cutscenes look pretty. Katano noted that development went smoothly since the team was already familiar with the Wii's capabilities. And yeah, it makes sense that they're coming out of Secret Rings and now they actually know what they're doing.
How many ports did they have under their belt at that point?
Man, yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
a lot.
Yeah, the Wii had the Unleashed game that came before this. I don't know how many team members from that worked on this, but it kind of feels like some did. But I think just like from a visual standpoint, this game was developed when the 3D boost era was in its infancy, and the game lacks boosting, but it does carry forward the art style that we have actually up to this day. So, in your opinion, do you think the Black Knight aesthetics still feel fresh because of that, or do you think the game looks dated, at least from an art perspective?
I think just looking at the game's graphics, it actually does. I mean, it's a Wii game, right? But aesthetically wise, I think it looks as well as Colors did. I think some of the textures they used for the grass and stuff, I think they reused some of it for Colors. I wouldn't be surprised, but it definitely looks as good as Colors. I think Colors look cooler because it was an actual Sonic game that was actually fast and it kept up these graphics. But I feel it definitely an extension of this game graphically. And I do like the aesthetics. I do like the storybook. Like you said, it has this really scribbly art style. I really dig it. I usually don't dig those art styles. I think Yakuza Team is the one that does it worse when they like become a storybook and it looks kind of cheap. This looks nice as a pleasing art style. So yeah.
Yeah, I think 2008 was like a big moment for the franchise where they really did like nail down Sonic's modern look. And I mean, there's a reason why in 2024, when they did the IHOP crossover with Sonic, the menu was using 2010 renders from All Stars Racing, and the general public didn't bat an eye. And it's because they kind of perfected Sonic's look. Now, I know some fans want them to do a major overhaul, but I think by this point, it would be a mistake. I think leave the drastic redesigns to like the movies. I don't think we need to change the entire cast of Sonic again after it's worked so well for the past 15 years, you know?
Especially like we have literally a new version of Sonic in the movies, so it'd be kind of confusing to have modern, classic movie Sonic and now a brand new Sonic. And what would you even do?
Right. And we kind of had that with Sonic Boom, you know? So I think, too, they look at this from a marketing and just logistics perspective. And they're like, if we redesign Sonic, we have to redesign every character in the canon. We have to make all new assets for all of our licensed products. And then on top of that, we can't technically do modern Sonic toys anymore. So now if people want a metal Sonic statue or something, it's going to be in the new look, you know, and then we're creating like a third bucket and it's just too much to, you know, like it's just nah. Now, I'm interested to see what happens with Mario because people have pointed out that the Switch 2 trailer shows like the cast kind of reimagined as the, I guess, 2D artwork. Yeah, Donkey Kong especially has like the old look, which is weird.
The 81 game, I think.
Right. And so we'll see how it goes. Let's let Mario do that, though.
Yeah.
Sonic and the Black Knight was officially revealed on July 21st, 2008 at Nintendo's pre-Tokyo Game Show press conference. Before its release, it was showcased at both TGS and New York Comic Con. In August 2008, Sega held a contest where fans could submit artwork with 20 winning illustrations featured in the game's gallery. Okay, I guess there was only 20. I feel like I sat through a lot more of them. However,
where's mine? Where's mine?
Yeah, where's mine? Bad news, though. After the release, one of the winners found to have plagiarized another artist's work, which
sucks.
I remember art theft being a big thing where they were like, Sonic committed art theft again. And the other instance was All-Stars Racing in the cards used Sonia from Sonic Underground fan art.
What do you think? Do you think these people should be jailed and serve hard time for stolen artwork?
Right. Yes, 100%. And then when Sonic becomes president.
Yeah.
The game launched in North America on March 3rd, 2009, followed by Japan and Oceania, I like saying that, on March 12th, and Europe on March 13th. So let's talk a little bit about the game's music and voice cast. The music of Sonic and the Black Knight. Something's making noise. The music in Sonic and the Black Knight was a large-scale collaboration featuring Jun Suno, who also served as art director, along with Richard Jacques, sound director, Howard Drawson, Yukata Minobe, Lenny Moore, and Hikaru Tanimoto. This marked Drawson's return to the Sonic series since Sonic and Knuckles in 1994.
I was going to say
the soundtrack blends rock and classical elements, with remixed tracks from the Sonic Adventure games also included. The game's 5 main vocal themes were performed by Crush 40, with additional vocals by Marty Friedman, Emma Gellert, and Tina Karlsdottir on With Me. So you had female vocalists again in the Sonic series, which was cool. Tommy Tallarico is apparently credited, but his contributions have since been disputed, so I didn't want to bring him up.
Oh. Is there...
he's always inserting himself.
Well, I should insert myself too. You should put my name on the end. It's like George also said he was in the soundtrack, but we can't determine. But he's trying.
Well, what do you think about that lineup of musicians, especially some legacy musicians returning?
Yeah, like you said, Howard came on this from Sonic and Knuckles, and I think it's that was pretty hype for the Sonic fan base at the time. This is an all-star. Some of these people haven't came back, like Crush 40 we talked about, and it's interesting because they put all these people on a side game, and even I don't feel like too many people talk about this game's soundtrack. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good for modern Sonic. You know, I prefer the older ones, the older games more, but this had a pretty good for a side game. But I'm just like, I don't hear that many people talk about this soundtrack as compared to other ones, and I don't know if they play them in the symphony tour they did. Did they play any of these music?
So I'll tell you right now, the Sonic and the Black Knight soundtrack gets people hyped up because the entire audience does the whoa 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 whoa, you know, like they. Yeah. In fact, it's one of the reasons I didn't go back the second time because I was like, that was a bit much for me.
How do you feel about the Crush? Because I feel like the Crush 40 stuff is what gets people more hyped in those Sonic events than anything else.
Oh, 100%. We saw them perform, remember, at the anniversary party. Mm-hmm. And I saw, I think, just June perform at the Sonic Boom New York event. But every time, like, they get the audience hyped up. People love them. And I think it's really cool that this soundtrack includes like remixes and just straight up like revisits of character themes from the Sonic Adventure games. It actually makes this game feel very much connected to Sonic Adventure 2, which I think, and you know, at the top of the show, you're like, why do you like this game? And I think that's another reason is it has a lot of like direct Sonic Adventure 2 DNA that I didn't know was there. And I think it really utilizes that well. Like when Knuckles appear and you hear his Sonic Adventure Knuckles theme, I was like, oh, that's really cool. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's a solid lineup. It's a really solid soundtrack. I like the takes on like Night of the Wind returning, but in like they have upbeat, like kind of chill versions of it with like old timey instruments. Like, I don't know what they used at the time, like lutes. Is lute an instrument? Maybe it is.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, I mean, overall, it's a solid soundtrack. If you want to own it, it sells for a lot of money now.
Nice.
I'm looking on. It's the 2 CD soundtrack on Discogs is going for nearly $500.
Discogs is overpriced, I would say. But
that's true.
eBay,
that's a good one. eBay. Well, if you want the game on eBay, so there you go. That's really good. Yeah.
It's about $200, $139, I think,
for the CD soundtrack.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing. You know, you're talking about the vocal ones, though. That's one CD and like 9 tracks.
I see.
The one that's like everything is $250. So that's quite a bit. You know, a couple discs and you get for $250. I don't know about that.
It's also free on Spotify, probably.
It is. But yeah, overall, I love the soundtrack. And I didn't mention it, but I love the menus too. I thought they were very dynamic. They very much feel dated, but I didn't really mind that. They had a very like grunge kind of look to them. I think it's the most dated element of the game. I liked when you picked a stage, like it went black and like someone like slices the screen and it falls away. I thought that was fun. But yeah, just overall, everything that Secret Rings tried to do, I think Black Knight like succeeded in doing, at least in terms of like music and user interface, maybe even controls. This was one of the last Sonic games to feature the English voice cast from the Sonic X anime, recorded by 4Kids Entertainment in New York City. With the exception of Mike Pollock as Dr. Eggman, all the actors were replaced by a new cast from Studiopolis in Los Angeles, starting with Sonic Freeriders in 2010, which is essentially the cast we have up to today. The Japanese cast, however, remains unchanged. What are your opinions on this era of Sonic voice actors?
The 4Kids voice actors?
Yeah.
I know that there's people that are nostalgic for them, but as a person that like, I don't know, had a semi-fully developed brain at the time, I would tell you I disliked them. So I would say that they were not that great. And people could also say that it was the writing at the time. And yes, it was also the writing at the time. I would also say that some of the worst games happened during this moments, during their reign, so that's why I think a lot of the negative stuff. But even when I take out all the bad writing, all this other stuff, I still think they were pretty bad for the most part. But what's your opinion on the 4Kids voice actors?
Yeah, I think they got the short end of the stick when it comes to types of games released. I'm looking at the list of titles, and like as far as main titles, their debut was Sonic 06.
Not good.
And then they had Sonic Unleashed, and then that was pretty much it. Though they did have the storybook games, the Rivals games, the Riders games, Shadow the Hedgehog. So just like a lot of junk and gunk. And any of the games that were really good at the time had very limited voice work, like Sonic Rivals, or I should say Sonic Rush, Sonic Rush Adventure, Smash Brothers Brawl. Like, you know, like their voices were in them. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. So, yeah, I think they just got the short end of the stick. And to be quite honest, like looking back now, they're kind of a blip. They only lasted like 4 years, but a lot of games released in that time. So it's interesting.
What do you think? Do you think the voice cast now is good? Because I've heard a lot of people that are like calling for the voice cast to be recasted. I've heard people,
I don't think it's
movies guy, and I'm like, oh no, it's too. Can you trying to get like celebrities to voice Sonic character? No, that.
Let the movies be the movies. Let Colleen be our one bridge for Tails, because to be quite honest, they're not going to cast a little boy to like casting children to voice Tails is a mistake because they age out of it, and casting like Tom Holland to voice Tails would just sound weird. So I think they made the right choice having a woman who does really good little boy voices, and in fact, it makes like really funny viral moments. I don't know if you watched the clip, but it was an interview with blanking on his name, the Sonic voice in the movies, but he has Colleen on the phone talking to this woman. Did you watch that?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, you have to watch it. It's like he's like, oh, this woman's a big fan of Tails. Colleen, can you do the voice? And the woman just starts laughing, and then Colleen as Tails is like, it's okay, you don't have to laugh. And he's like, no, she's crying. He goes, oh, don't cry. I get scared sometimes. You know, it's really funny. But yeah, I think it's just a shame that they didn't get their time to shine. They didn't get the time to really grow into the roles. But I think it was the right choice, because I as much as I like some of those voice actors, I don't think they have the gravitas or the experience that like Roger Craig Smith has. And, you know, Roger will age out eventually. He's been in the voice for 15 years, and it's the longest run we've ever had for Sonic voice actors, at least in English. So, yeah, we'll see. Sonic and the Black Knight, it received mixed reviews, with Metacritic and Game Rankings scoring it around 55%. It debuted at 30th on the Japan sales chart, selling 13,000 copies, and reached 10th in North America. In the UK, it earned a Silver Sales Award for over 100,000 copies sold. Sega delisted the game in 2010 to strengthen the Sonic brand ahead of Sonic 4 Episode 1 and Sonic Colors. Critics praised the visuals and soundtrack, but criticized the swordplay and controls. IGN found the gameplay broken and the controls unresponsive, while Game Daily noted repetitive combat and simple missions, but appreciated the presentation. Official Nintendo magazine echoed these critiques, and GameSpot highlighted a delay in sword mechanics. 1UP gave it a C+. They called it competent but overly simplistic, and VideoGamer.com gave it a 5 out of 10, criticizing its lack of depth. Which, you know, I'll ask you if you agree with the critics' assessment, but you can tell by like up till now, I was like really pretty positive on the game. So 55% in all these negative comments was very wrong. I don't know.
I mean, I would agree with like the 1UP review where they give it a C plus and they say it's competent but overly simplistic. And I think at this time, a lot of people that paid $50 for this probably wanted a little more than 2 hours. And it does have a lot of cutscenes too. And I think that's why the fans like it, because in this era, there wasn't too many cutscenes for Sonic characters the way this game did, the story.
Right.
So... but yeah, I would say if you're just a gamer that was looking for a game, this would have been overly simplistic and a little short. But I feel like that with every Wii game I play. Like, I always feel like, oh, this is a cool game with cool gimmicks, but it's just very simplistic and short, which could be a positive and a negative. But yeah, what do you think about the critics' assessments, though?
Well, it's worth pointing out that this was the peak and really the creation of the Sonic cycle, which was a critic and journalistic created thing where they were extra hard on Sonic. Sonic, either had to be perfect or Sonic was just kind of not good. And they like to dunk on Sonic. And I think they were waiting for a game like this. They wanted to clown on it. They wanted to make fun of it. Sonic with a sword looks silly. It's stupid, kiddie, etc. But like all the people I talked to who grew up playing this game, who didn't know that, like the series was in a funk after 06 or didn't know the ins and outs of the franchise and just got this as a game with like Sonic and a sword, they loved it. And I kind of feel like I approached it from that mindset just because like you said, like this, people bought this game for $50 and then it ends up being like maybe 10 hours max with a couple hours gameplay. But yeah, for me, like, it was just kind of a happy surprise in my big library of games where I'm like, oh, this has a lot of Sonic Adventure 2 DNA. The presentation's really good. The soundtrack is great. The gameplay is overly simplistic, but this is me in 2025 playing a game from 2009, and it's a good thing. Like, I'm not looking for Sonic Frontiers, or I'm not even looking like a Mario Galaxy. I just want something that's, fun, arcadey kind of mechanics, and it delivers that for me. If I were to give it a letter grade, maybe a B- would be a little more me, just because from what I've played of Secret Rings, I would have never thought that the follow-up would be enjoyable. And I much prefer when a team does a game and then does another game and learns from their mistakes and makes a better game. Like, I prefer that to like Sonic Team going from Shadow the Hedgehog to Sonic 06. And it's like, you're not learning anything. You just keep making bad games. So yeah, I don't agree with the critics' assessment. I think this was from an era where they really wanted to be down on Sonic. I even remember when Sonic Colors came out, they like wanted to be down on it, but they were like, God damn it, it's good. Like they were mad. And I remember like, I don't know what game triggered IGN being like, Sonic was never good in that video. But like, I feel like that was them reacting to a good Sonic game and they were upset that they had to like it. And it was one of those situations, and I've experienced that with people where they're like you'll be like, oh, you got to watch Mad Men. It's so good. It's such a good show. And they go, you know what? Everyone's telling me it's good. I don't want to watch it. It sounds stupid. I hate it. And it's like, I think if everyone's telling you it's good, it's probably good. Check it out.
Or just give it a try, at least. Like, I hate when people do that, where they're like, oh, what I hate about myself is when somebody overhypes it and then I start nitpicking things and I try to tell myself, stop. Just watch the show like they never told you anything. Stop being a weirdo.
Right.
Then,
yeah, that's actually one of my biggest pet peeves. And I've actually like stopped being friends with people when like time and time again, we'll agree on things. And then there's something I like and I tell them about and I know they're going to like it. It's proven to be great. And they're like, oh, that looks stupid. I'm not going to like that. And I'm like, we literally like the same stuff. And I'm giving you a very good recommendation here. Like, what the hell? I'm not recommending you play this game, George. It's not like that. But yeah, let's now jump into a very quick. I added this to the notes as we were talking because I was looking at the box art. I'm just going to hold them up here real quick.
I did pull them up, but on the browser, but I think they're too zoomed in. But I'll zoom in.
No. Well, I technically just wanted to talk about this. I really like the consistency of the two storybook games. If you look in my hands, I'm holding Rings and Black Knight. Similar placement. The logos are like kind of similar with silver and gold, but different enough to be unique. The one thing missing, obviously, is like the page turn storybook series logo, which I really wish they like did a reprint of Secret Rings and included it. But what drew my eye is the fact that the backs are like the same. It looks so cool. It's Sonic in the same pose, which you actually see used again years later in Frontiers, of him running into combat. It's the same pose, but a different render where they showcase either the ring on his hand or the sword in his hand, and then the villains off in the distance. In the case of Secret Rings, it's the, Erazur Jin. And then in the case of Black Knight, it's Shadow and Knuckles. They even have the three screens in the same place. It's just, as a graphic designer, it's so satisfying to put these games side by side, and like
why
the fronts and the side, it just doesn't that look good?
It does, but it also kind of screams to like, if I paid for this, I'd be like, did Barry just copy and paste the whole back again?
Well, that's what I like about it, is none of the assets are reused. It's just the same like layout basically. But I like that. I appreciate that. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. As far as merchandise, though, so Black Knight actually had a lot, at least when compared to Secret Rings. So the game had a manga, which was published in Dengeki Nintendo DS magazine. There was also a short Western comic, which was published in issue 197 of Archie Comics, I should say, Archie Sonic Comics. And it was reprinted in the trade paperback Sonic Select The Games. And I actually have that here in hand. And it's short. It's just like it's the opening cutscene in comic book form, but it's just kind of cool to see. And if you're a fan of the games, which I suspect you are if you're listening to this is a great trade paperback to pick up. It's I think still really cheap. And it reprints almost all of the Archie ones. It's got Sonic Lost World. It's got even like the mobile games like Sonic Jump and Sonic Dash.
I forgot.
There's a really funny Sonic Rush one where Sonic and Blaze are like punching each other. And I posted this to our Instagram, but it's like Sonic helping Blaze up, and he just goes, "I'm Sonic," and she goes, I
have seen that one. I've seen that
where
one.
she goes, huh. But yeah, it's got Sonic Rush Adventure, Black Knight. It even has Sonic and the Secret Rings comic, which was originally a DVD motion comic exclusive to Target.
That's
so the fact that they de-digitized it just makes me happy, and it makes me wish that IDW would put their Sonic Forces comic that they did
physically
on paper. But they did that recently with the there was a Fang the Hunter trade paperback, and inside they put the prequel comic for Sonic Superstars that used to be digital only for the socials. So I know you're a comic book guy. I'm sometimes when like there's digital only stuff that like lives online, it's nice to see it printed.
I agree. There's a lot of stories now that are going digital. I feel like it might be the future for comics in the future, or at least maybe they'll do more volumes in a way, like those, like the one you had where there's collections.
But yeah, I'd hope so. Jazzwares, who were the makers of Sonic toys at the time, released several Black Knight figures in their 5-inch line, and Sonic with Caliburn, and he had like the little gauntlet hand. Excalibur Sonic, which was their equivalent of Super Sonic, which we didn't talk about on this episode, but that was really cool. Lancelot Shadow, and then Galahad Silver, which is interesting because Galahad Silver is really just a battle mode character. He's not even in the story, but I think they had the silver action figure already, so it was cheaper than making like a 5-inch Blaze. I have a link here. We can take a look at some of them, but I will say I own a few of the Jazzwares 5-inch figures. They're trash. Like what they did was they assembled Sonic almost like he's like Pinocchio, and then they took little tiny plastic pegs and just like pressed them in to hold the parts together. And those pegs will pop out, and you'll have like the tiniest little piece of blue plastic that's meant to hold Sonic's arm in place. It's the worst.
Yeah, do you
what's that?
Glue 'em? Do you super glue them?
No. Well, the funny thing is my Sonic Unleashed Werehog arm broke within like weeks of owning it, and I tried to glue it back on, and it just doesn't work. His body is like a cavity that you shove it's yucky. But looking at these figures, I really wish I got them. I never did, just because I didn't like the quality control. But I can imagine, like, if you're not posing these a lot, especially Excalibur Sonic, like the detail on him looks really cool. And I will say I really like the idea of this game presenting an alternate super form, which is another plus for me, because I always like when Sonic games like give you a new way of him turning super. Like I think Frontiers did that. Sonic 3 and Knuckles did that. It's cool to have it here. As we mentioned, there were also soundtrack CDs and a very rare Caliburn Wii accessory, which was exclusive to parts of Europe. And I have linked here a Reddit post from a guy 2 years ago who managed to find 2 of them online for $40, which is insane because I think in those countries, they sometimes go for a couple $100, but it's literally Caliburn straight out of the game with a slot for the Wiimote. Isn't that like, and why was this not in the West? Like,
I think
kids would have eaten this up.
I think we had the same thing happen with, I think, Bayonetta, where they got like guns or something, like fake for the game. That sucks because Europe got some cool stuff. I would love this. I mean, if they released it here, but I probably wouldn't have bought it. It looks kind of like a Guitar Hero. If I was a kid, I would be like, is that a Guitar Hero game?
I mean,
Sonic?
I will say, having played the game, that it wouldn't work that well because, like, when I'm playing, I'm just this and going like that. It's like the most, laziest thing. And this one's asking you to be like, ha, 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 like really swiping. I will say, though, it did remind... No, I don't. But it did remind me I should get the Sombre Amigo, like, third-party Wii accessories. I really want to get those. So, yeah, closing thoughts, George. What are your overall thoughts on the Black Knight? Did I persuade you to think differently about this title, or do you think it's Wii trash?
I think
Wii
it's
garbage.
one of the nicer Wii games for Sonic outside of not counting colors. And it's one of the more interesting side games, I would say, at the time, because there was a lot of bad side games. They tried to do a lot of things like the PSP games and some of the DS.
For sure.
But this one's pretty interesting. It's unique and it works on the Wii. Outside of that, I would say that I think fans that are new and they're going to jump into this game are going to probably appreciate it more than we are, especially if you play it on the Dolphin with like regular controls where you don't have to waggle, you can just press a button. I think they would probably enjoy a lot more and like the characterization, especially now that I feel like it's been a while since we had playable Sonic friends in a kind of a single player game. So yeah, what are your closing thoughts, Barry?
I mean, yeah, I'm very happy that our Patreon picker picked this one and kind of forced me to revisit it and enjoy it. I think it's one of those Sonic games from an era of some really bad or misguided Sonic games, and this was really kind of a diamond in the rough. it definitely is a hidden gem of that era. And it's probably one of the few good games to release between Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors, at least in terms of like main Sonic gameplay kind of things. I think a lot of the spin-offs were doing things right. But yeah, I would say, you know, come for the music and presentation and story. Stay for the surprisingly limited but open 3D gameplay that really kind of evokes maybe like City Escape in a bit, or you know, some of the more like tunnel based Sonic 3D stages, and I think you'll have a fun time. Now, our Patreon supporters, if you support us at any tier, you get to share your memories. We'll read them at the end of the show. But if you're the picker, we read your pick at the start. But our Patreon supporters this time include memories from Alex H., who says, I remember getting it as a graduation gift from my cousins back in 2014. I thought it was an all right game, but never finished it. But that can change, and I hope that can change after this episode. Nicholas Schaefer says, wow, I remember when this game came out. I was super upset about the sword, but felt it wasn't as bad as Shadow having a gun. I enjoyed Secret Rings, but found the missions tedious. This game, on the other hand, was way too easy, but the story and music was great. My big complaint that stands to this day is difficulty balance. The game is so easy, I can play with with my eyes closed. To end game bosses gave me flashbacks like Carnival Zone Barrel, as I couldn't figure out how to beat them without going online. In the end, it's a decent side adventure game, but not what I'm really looking for from Sonic. And George, on the next episode of Sega Talk, I have to bring it up here. I actually closed the window. But our pickers...
Theme park, right?
That's right. So we're not just talking about... We're just not just talking about Sega theme parks. We're talking about our imaginary, ideal Sega theme park. We'll do some episode planning offline, but I suspect it would be fun to talk about some of Sega's real world or attempted arcade ventures, and then we can share our thoughts on what we think would be a winning formula for them, because I know we'll never have another opportunity to talk about their attempt at a Puyo Puyo theme park, where it was like a Coliseum the size of the Coliseum with a green Puyo on top. You remember that?
Yeah, I really wish someone would like make that into a 3D model that you could like look at what they thought it was going to be, like the size of a real person. Yeah,
right. There's theme park concept art you can find too, where they like tried to do like their interpretations of Disneyland. So,
yeah.
You know, yeah.
So we'll be covering all that next time on Sega Talk. Bye.
Bye.